All right, we have Dr. J with the Agriculture and Environmental Services Laboratories. He's going to be talking about the survey of from the last 3 years of the citrus nutrients and other services offered to, it looks like, from the lab. Please give them your attention.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending. A little bit about me. I am the director of the Ag Environmental Services Labs. We are a unit of extension. Our role is to provide analytical services to growers from around the state, hopefully through your extension office. So we do soil analysis, plant tissue analysis, animal waste, feed, forages, water, and in addition to a myriad of specialty crops like citrus. So we wanted to get engaged with this emerging industry, and part of that engagement was due to the fact that there is not a citrus specialist. So as the laboratory's wide berth of experience and knowledge and expertise, we can provide that sort of service to these emerging commodities. So we've done a lot of work with the Olive Growers Association, the Wine Grape Association, but definitely the citrus is the most promising new industry by far. So we were very pleased to have the opportunity to do this research to hopefully, provide some fundamental information to help guide the growers as far as their nutritional concerns are. So we did write a grant for a 3-year survey of doing plant tissue testing. But before I get into that, I want to go a little bit back, because while plant nutrition is important, it kind of we need to start at the beginning, at the ground level. So when we talk about our fertility, we're really talking about the system in place, and usually that starts with the soil. The system in place that consistently provides your plants with nutrients throughout a growing season so that it never is left wanting for any particular nutrient. So the goal of a fertilizer program is to make sure that there is no deficiencies. And that, of course, is the crux of it. That's one of the caveats that can be controlled in an agricultural system, is your soil prep. And that's why we stress so much, because if you have good fertile soil, you're going to optimize your chances of actually producing the kind of yields that you expect. Of course, we know there's 1,000 other things that could go wrong, but at least with the soil, that is the foundation of the process. And all soils are created equal, right? It doesn't matter where you are in the world. No, of course, I'm kidding. So soils are vastly different. And this is part of the issue, that when we look for information, to gain information, we have to take that into consideration. Soils in the southeastern United States are absolutely nothing like the soils in any other part of the state. We are very, very unique. And so we see this little coastal plain region that spans all the way up the East Coast, right? This used to be beachfront property, right? Where that line intersects. Yeah, that was all beachfront property a couple million years ago. And so these soils were all derived from that sedimentary process, and that's why they're all nice, sandy, deep sand type soils with very little clay. And then as you go south, you're going to get more and more. But even in the instance of looking at just coastal plain soils, there's a wide difference between their various properties. So not only are these soils very, very different with everything else, there's even a lot of variability inherent within the same soil type. So when we're dealing with Georgia soils, at the very least, we're dealing with these coastal plain soils in the south, and they can kind of be separated into the sandhills, southern coastal plain, and then you've got these flatwoods. These are all of, very, very deep sand soils, with the most predominant being a Tifton loamy sand. So that is kind of what we're dealing with. These are ultisols. They're relatively rare. Less than 10% of the world is an ultisol. So we're kind of unique in that. They're intensely leached. So they're very, very weathered soils, which means they're kind of like, just as you age, things don't have the same kind of padding as they used to. They don't hold up to the same amount of pressure like they used to, and so they're old soils, which means that, and they're predominantly made up of quartz with a little bit of kaolinitic clays, mostly iron aluminum oxides, if you even have any clay within your soil types, but mostly that quartz sand. They're very acidic, very naturally acidic, and because of all of that, collectively, they are very low fertility. So there's a lot that has to be managed when we're dealing with the soil. And when we talk about fertility, we talk about the soil's ability to continuously supply nutrients. So quartz sand has no ability to hold anything. Soils are charged surfaces. They're mostly filled with negative charges, and those charges are what allow them to hold on to counter charges. So they're very negatively charged, and they do a great job at holding anything that has a positive charge, like calcium, magnesium, ammonium, potassium are all positively charged things. So your soil has the ability to hold on to these things, and they'll be held in reserve for when the plant needs them down the road. Of course, if you're dealing with high sands, you lose that charge and the ability to hold on to nutrients. So already we're dealing with heavily leached soils that just don't hold much. So this exchange capacity is what this is that I'm referring to, is that soil. So here's some soil clay particles, and all these little dashes are the negative charges, and then this would be like the water pores in between the soils, and all these cations are swimming around and holding onto the soil, being exchanged so that the plant can take it up. So this is just like a simple cartoon based on that fundamental soil fertility premise. The root sends a little root hair into this water pore. So this is where that interface is between the soil and that water. So it's supplying nutrients to that root. The root then takes it up. If there's no ability for that soil to hold on to those nutrients, it's going to take everything from that pore, and then it's done. There's going to be no more. So the soil has to continually replenish the nutrients that root's taking up. I like to use this little backyard chicken waterer as a kind of example of that, right? So here's your root pore, the root going into that little water pore, and it's full of water and nutrients, and it drinks it, and as that little reservoir declines, that bobber goes down, and you've got this nice big reservoir to refill it. And that's the crux of soil fertility. It's the ability of your soil to play that big reservoir of nutrients, to hold on to it for when your plant needs it. Not all dumping it on all at once, but just metering it out consistently over the course of that season. So, when we talk about a fertility program, we want to boost that soil's ability to do that, to hold those nutrients. And so we manage the soils. So essentially, we're not necessarily increasing the total amount of nutrients that exist in the soil, but we're creating a chemistry type system in place that will allow those nutrients to continually be released by the soil so that the plant is never wanting for it. And the more fertile our soil, the bigger the reservoir. And pH is especially important in this entire process. So usually one of the most fundamental aspects of managing any kind of agricultural system is that you've got to get your pH to the spot that is well characterized for that particular plant. In the case of citrus, you know, they prefer a much higher pH. They don't much, I mean, they're not adapted to acidic environments that we have in the Southeast. And now as you go down into Florida, even though those are very similar soil types, the soils in Florida are actually very calcareous. So they're naturally pH 7 to 8 with tons and tons of calcium. Even though there's mostly sand, they have that calcareous substrata that we don't have in Georgia. So that is the difference. And you know, the important aspect of this is because as you go more acidic, as then you go down, you go to a 4.5, you become more acidic, or if you go less acidic, you go up to like a 7.5. It changes how those elements and nutrients react with the soil and then are subsequently released by the soil. So in a very acid soil, you will get more release of metals and micronutrients. As you go up to a 7.5, you get more availability of calcium and magnesium, potassium. And you can see the issue with increasing the pH too much is while you might get more availability of the stuff that you want your plant to take up, you also start to lose one of those major macro elements like phosphorus. So phosphorus doesn't do well at a high or low pH. So generally, we're always shooting for that sweet spot right in the middle. It's like 6.5. And that maximizes the availability of all the nutrients collectively. So that's sort of the goal, and that should be, regardless of what fertilizer or how much or when you're putting it out, getting that pH adjusted is definitely going to be one of the primary fundamental factors of providing good nutrition to your crops. That's only, of course, one small aspect of growing, you know, because dealing with perennials is very, very different than dealing with, you know, row crops and in other types of annuals. And because of that, not only should you do soil testing, but when it comes to perennials, plant tissue analysis is really one of the best way to gauge your overall fertility. And it is used basically to make sure that everything that you're putting out is getting to where it needs to be, i.e., you know, into the leaves, so that it can, you know, produce good fruit. So you want to look to the plant tissue to gauge, you know, your micro elements and your macro elements, because the soils, you know, you're primarily only looking at pH, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are really the only three aspects of a soil test that provide, you know, good information in fine-tuning a system. I mean, you can measure microelements in the soil, but it's not as informative as a plant tissue test. Hence why we looked to doing this 3-year study of assessing plant tissue. So I don't want anyone to read this. It's just simply a table of all the elements and their primary function. They're all very, very important, and they all play a role. Some, you know, it doesn't take much, like the micro elements. It just has to be there, and that's enough. Whereas with the primary and the secondary nutrients, it's more about abundance and the ratios in between them. So, but they're all very important for some, you know, main function of the plant process. So nitrogen, of course, is one of the key elements in the nutrition system. And typically what we were seeing with nitrogen is that there were no deficiencies in nitrogen. This is kind of what some, you know, leaves would normally look like with deficiencies, but that doesn't seem to be an issue. If anything, you know, the data suggested that there was too much nitrogen being applied. Phosphorus was also a little bit on the high end, and we know phosphorus is important because of lack of it. You know, you get thick rinded fruits. It increases the acidity of the fruit, so it loses some flavor compounds that you would want in it. And then on the leaves, you would normally see that purpling, interveinal purpling. But again, we did not see too much of that. I think, from looking at the data, most of the growers really had their macro elements down, and they were doing. I guess that's a little easier than dealing with some of the other elements, but there was definitely very little deficiencies. Similarly with potassium, we saw that most of the plants had good amounts of potassium. The biggest factor, I think, for citrus is simply some of the sizes of the fruits tend to get a little small if there is a deficiency. But potassium, if nothing else, plays a role in overall resilience of the plant. So if a plant doesn't have enough potassium, it's going to be more susceptible to certain diseases and pests. So just having potassium in there just makes the whole plant stronger. So there were some of these types of deficiencies is what we were really seeing a majority of. We did see a good bit of magnesium deficiencies and iron deficiencies. And I attribute this primarily to the lack of clay that we have in South Georgia, because that is your primary source for micronutrients. That's where all of your metals are usually being held. I mentioned that sand doesn't have any charge to it. And what that means is sand can't hold on to anything, including micronutrients. So anything, that's put into a sand, it'll only stay there as long as the water doesn't move in that profile. As soon as you get an inch of rain, all those nutrients have now moved down an inch. And then you get another inch and they've moved down an inch further, and that's all they're going to do. They're just going to move with the water. Whereas if you did have organic matter or clays a little bit in there, it's actually going to bind up in the soil and kind of stay, at least in the upper zones where you would want it. Copper and molybdenum was almost universally deficient in most of the cases, and that's another one where very acidic soils tend to be very deficient in molybdenum, and very low organic matter soils also. So, which again, not terribly surprising that you would see that. But yeah, most of the plants that we saw had very little molybdenum, and copper similarly was also pretty low. And again, I attribute that to the soil types that we had. Zinc deficiencies were pretty universal as well. We saw this in the field quite a bit when we were out there sampling that first year. And that's a telltale sign of zinc deficiency in plants. Boron, on the other hand, was the only micronutrient that we saw the inverse. Most of the boron we found was exceedingly high. I attribute that to probably a spray program that incorporates a foliar boron spray. I assume is what most growers were doing, because normally boron would be pretty low in the soils. And then the only one that was most striking was calcium deficiency. I mean, most of the plant tissues that we sampled were very, very low in calcium. And there's really not much in the literature on calcium in terms of citrus, and that's primarily because of the soils that most citrus had been grown historically in is already very high pH, high natural calcium. So in Florida, for example, you would never see calcium deficiency because there's so much calcium in their soil. We do not have that. Our soils are acidic and leached. We have very, very little calcium, which is.
So we have that. That's what causes a leak.
Yeah, this would be calcium deficiency. This is lemon. And inversely, that's why we do so well at blueberries. Blueberries hate calcium, and they love acidic soils. That's why we're usually the #1 blueberry producer in the United States, because of our soil types. They're naturally suited. Not that the citrus are less adaptable, but I think, if you look in production guides, there's going to be a lot less about calcium because it's historically never been an issue in those regions that it was grown. Again, newer crop to Georgia. So that's, to me, is one of the areas that probably needs some focus. A lack of calcium you get some thickening of the leaves. It tends to decrease overall fruit production. You get some dieback, things like that, misshapen fruit. And I guess that the crux of it is, like, a lot of these micronutrient symptoms are pretty universal. Like, here's an example of geranium fertility trial where they just decreased that one element in each one. And so when you get down to the really extremes, I mean, they all look bad. So it's really difficult to say that you couldn't just look at this and say, oh, that's molybdenum deficiency. I mean, it looks an awful lot like zinc deficiency. It looks a lot like manganese deficiency. So, plant tissue analysis is really, really the best way that you're, moving forward, that you're going to be able to properly identify these types of deficiencies. So that's all the background. Now I'll jump right into the specifics of the 3-year program. So this was a specialty crop block grant. We partnered up with Food Pick, and our part of the grant was to essentially get as much plant leaf samples as we could over a 3-year period, and do all the analytical work that we can do, and help interpret some of the results. So this is actually one of the trees that we were sampling from that first year, and that's what I say. This looked to me like a telltale sign of zinc deficiency, and I do believe that is what the results showed when we actually completed that analysis. So over the 3-year period, we had a total of 240 samples, and that was from 44 different growers. So we had a nice big sample size, and that really looked at a lot of the industry. This came from 16 different counties, and they were quite evenly distributed. So it wasn't just Lowndes County and like maybe 2 others beside it. This was a nice swath of the state, and we had, like I said, 44 different growers. We took we did the sampling ourselves the first year, and when we did it, we were taking about 50 leaves from non-fruiting twigs that looked very, very uniform. We stayed away from any abnormalities, because we were just trying to gauge, fertility, not look for trees that were obviously, deficient. We were trying to get trees that looked representative of the grove itself. And we sampled mature leaves, 1 per shoot, including the stem. We did wash the leaves prior to analysis because we weren't sure about what foliar sprays were being applied, and we didn't want that to interfere with the results. So all of the leaves got a nice washing with soapy water, and then we rinsed them all off with clean deionized water. So it's important to note that when you are looking at deficiencies, that elements are not, they do not behave in the same way in the same parts of the tissue. So normally, if you're looking specifically, if you specifically suspect that there's a deficiency or a toxicity, you would want to preferentially sample those leaves. In the case of elements that are highly mobile, like nitrogen, if you expect a deficiency, you check the old leaves. If you expect toxicity, you check new leaves. And that's because nitrogen is highly mobile, and usually it takes nutrients from the old leaves and moves them into the new leaves, just like parents trying to get their kids to grow up. They provide that support. But they're not all elements. So this is an absent father, calcium. He's immobile. He doesn't care about the new leaves. He's just hanging out and he's good. So if you think you have calcium, you generally would just look in the new leaves, because if there's enough calcium there, then the new leaves will have enough. But if there's not enough calcium, then the old leaves aren't going to help them out, so they're going to be low. But when we sample, we're not really biasing ourselves. So that's why we take the first, fully matured leaf, and so they're not very old, but they're not very young. So it's kind of like that sweet spot right in the middle. And that way, when we interpret the results, we know that we're not skewing one way or the other in terms of old versus young. And for the interpretation of the results, a lot of what constitutes too little or too much depends on the area. So for this study, we just stuck with the University of Florida simply based on, proximity. But yeah, you could see that there's a plant analysis handbook. That's a generalized guide. There's not much research that goes into the plant analysis handbook. It's more that they just take a whole bunch of leaves and they say, this is what we saw, so that must be normal. They don't really know. The Florida one's definitely research-based, as is the Auburn and the California extension. But we figured the Florida one is probably the most researched, so that's the one where we used as our basis for saying this was deficient or this was too much. So here is all of the growers that I averaged all of the data from each individual grower and then put it on a chart of, this is for nitrogen, and we looked at excess, which is almost like you could be running into toxicity issues. High, just meaning that there's definitely more nitrogen than the plant needs. Might not run into toxicity issues, but it might still be enough to cause fruit quality decline, for example. And then the optimum range is what the University of Florida guide says this is what you should target. And then low, and then when you would run into deficiency. So for the most part, you can see that almost all the growers were pretty much in the high to excess range. So I was saying, definitely people got the nitrogen fertility down. If anything, probably need to reduce some of that nitrogen, especially because it tends to make them less cold hardy. And if anything, if we learned anything this year, is that we definitely don't want to do anything that's going to make them more susceptible to cold. Here's the phosphorus data. Not quite as many excesses, but still a lot of highs. Not really problematic. If it gets too high, you can get some fruit decline. But I would worry more about that if it was up there in the excess. So I think all in all, these phosphorus was pretty decent. You can see a lot of them were right in that optimum range. And whatever phosphorus puts out, it's a very slow moving element. So when it's put out, it could take 2 to 3 years before it really makes it up into the leaves. So it's kind of harder to fine tune. So if you see that you're, in a high range, you might need to think back to what you applied, 2 or 3 years ago. If you've already made the adjustment and you're still seeing high, it might be that you just need to give it more time for those numbers to get right in that sweet optimum spot.
So it might take 2 years for it to come back down?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. If you were to say, apply 33% less phosphorus 1 year, it might take 1 or 2 more years before you would see that drop in the tissue, because it is such a slow moving element, and trees just work at a different pace than, your row crops, where you would see that, instant uptake like cotton. And then of course, by comparison, here's calcium. And you can see that really the only 3 growers were in the optimum range for calcium. Everything else was low or deficient. And again, we attribute that to probably people not really thinking about calcium much, and that may be because, like I said, the fruit production guide from Florida, it's tailored for their growers, which are growing in these soils that are already enriched with calcium carbonate. So it's like they would never see a calcium issue, and they wouldn't even need to apply any calcium. We do, clearly. And so some of this, I think will, by getting that calcium up, we'll definitely see some quality improvements. So here's kind of a summation of the macro elements. The average value across all the growers, and then I colored it in red if it was consistently high, and then I put the percentage of growers. So here's nitrogen. 73% of growers had too much nitrogen, 14% were right in the optimum range, and 13% were low. For potassium, similarly, 70% high, 28% were in the optimum, and nobody, really only 1 or 2 growers had deficiencies. Similar trend with potassium. Calcium, nobody was in the high range, 80% was low. Magnesium, less problematic, only 30% low. And then with sulfur, seemed like we're good on sulfur. And I couldn't find much on if having too much sulfur was problematic. I didn't come across anything that really commented on sulfur. And then some grow guides don't even comment on sulfur, so maybe it's just not super important for citrus. You guys may know better than me. Here's the micronutrients. So this was boron. And again, that's why I suspect that we have very deficient soils when it comes to boron. We typically advise people to put at least a pound of boron out per acre regardless, because those soils are usually very deficient. So because this was all very excess, again, I don't know, but I'm assuming, do you guys foliar apply boron? Okay, well then there you go. So yeah, that was definitely in the high range, but a good smattering was also in that optimum range. So we definitely did not see any deficiencies, a few that were in the low end, but when we were out there sampling, I mean, there was quite a large scale of people's overall husbandry practices on their fields. So I suspect some were thinking, I'll just plant a couple rows and collect my money. I don't know. Iron deficiencies were a little more common. So it's possible that, with like if you're going to spray with something, maybe you also include a bit of iron into that. Some chelated iron probably as a foliar application would help, because a lot of these were in the low range, and with just a smattering that were in the optimal. And similar to the macro slide, here's the micronutrients. So across the board, we were either usually on the low end, with the exception of boron, where majority was good. So 57% was too low in iron. With copper and molybdenum, it was very, very high, and then zinc was 80% of this growers were deficient. So I don't know if rainbow blends of foliar applications is feasible when you're doing your boron, if they have negative interactions. I'm not a fertilizer person, so that's a question for a specialist. Jake probably would know, I would surmise. Yeah, and the next speaker would know for sure. But yeah, so again, we saw pretty consistent low micronutrients, with the exception being boron. But iron manganese was kind of hit or miss. You were either optimum or you were low, but it was basically a 50-50 split. And molybdenum, again, very low. So now here is those same charts, but what I did is I looked at growers that submitted multiple years. So in one year, you got your report, and then in the following year, you sent out new samples, hopefully taking those into consideration. And this is what we saw. So we saw that for people who submitted multiple years, in their most recent submission, which was 2023, they applied 10% less nitrogen, 6% less phosphorus. Potassium stayed the same. There was a 62% increase in calcium and a 14% increase in magnesium with no change in sulfur. So right away, that tells me that you guys were actually taking some of this information into account, which I greatly appreciated. I was like, we actually did something and you guys used it. That's incredible. So yeah, so hopefully, you know, that will translate to more uniformity in your groves and more uniformity in your yields. So that was great. Similarly, with the micronutrients, we saw that the growers that submitted multiple years, we saw an increase in iron, 20%. Boron went up even more, so I don't know. Zinc went up a little bit, so that's something that maybe we need to find the right type of zinc that to improve that uptake. Because, yeah, we didn't see much movement on zinc, even though we were still at 80% deficient. Manganese went up by 54%, copper went up by 65%, and molybdenum. I mean, so that's great. So clearly the growers that took that information, adjusted their fertility programs, and we saw it in the results. And so that was great to see. So hard to say, you know, about the overall impact, especially this year with most of the yields not being very optimal or existent. So continually looking forward, you know, we still need to look at these adjustments. If you haven't already, I would say definitely, you know, make sure you're testing, and then if you are in that high range, definitely start tailoring back with the nitrogen, especially because we know that it makes the plants more susceptible to freeze damage, and it doesn't do you any favors in fruit quality anyway to have too much. Similarly with phosphorus, if you're in that high range, back off the phosphorus. It's not, more is not better. It's you're throwing away money probably, and it also can have negative impacts on the fruit quality. Make sure you are soil testing. Try to hit that 6.5 if possible. The micronutrients definitely probably needs to be a foliar application for any kind of sustainable fertility management because of our sandy soils and the fact that they're just not going to hold as much as they should because of just the lack of clay and organic matter that is so important. And finally, we really need yield data in some regard to moving forward. So hopefully, when we do get that specialist position, we can start doing some actual fertilizer trials where we have that yield data and we can really fine-tune all these results. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks to Lindy for supporting us and Jake for helping us out so much. There is a QR code here with a very short quiz, or not quiz, survey. Just to, we promised the USDA that we would solicit some feedback. It's just 3 questions, right? 5 questions, but take you less than 30 seconds if you want to do it. We would appreciate it, and I'll leave that up there for a minute. Hey, man, I took 40 minutes.
All right, any questions for him? I'll leave that up until questions are completed, and also next up would be the Georgia Commission, or the Georgia Citrus Commission. They're going to give a brief update on what they got going on as well. And then after that, at 2:30, if not a little bit before, Dr. Muhammad will be coming up to present. Any questions? If not, I'll go ahead and exit out. And
Afternoon, everybody. My name is Justin Jones. I am a citrus grower over in Leesburg, Georgia, right above Albany, and then also a board member of the newly formed Georgia Citrus Commodity Commission through the Department of Ag. Here are your members. I think some of y'all may have heard this already this morning, but we wanted to make sure we're getting everybody up to date on what's happening. But here are your members, here are your advisory members. All these were voted on by the citrus community. The main thing we want to talk about is the Commodity Commission is every crop in Georgia usually has a Commodity Commission that takes money as an assessment on a crop and then puts it back towards research and education and back into the crop. So this is what the Commodity Commission has decided to do and voted on. So as of in 24's crop, the commission will be taking an assessment of 0.2 of a pound of produced or marketable fruit, packed fruit at a packing shed. To qualify, the qualifications are potentially of a 50,000 pounds from a grower standpoint. This will be voted on by the citrus. I mean, this isn't put in place. What we're doing is making everybody aware. And basically the voting will start on March 1st and go through March 31st. We have to mail out ballots, but we will be available to have ballots handed out to you in person at the Georgia Citrus Association meeting, which is February 27th. Is that correct, Lindy? In Tifton. So you can easily take your ballot, fill it out there, turn it back in. But if not, your ballot will be mailed to you. The biggest thing we want to make sure is to make sure that you're on the list that we have compiled as a grower list for the Commodity Commission. We have a list in the back. Please make sure your name's on there with correct address and everything else. If it's not, we have a fill-in sheet that we can put it on there to make sure you get a ballot to get voted on. But again, this period is March 1st to the 31st, and after that we'll tally votes and kind of go from there. But you know, if you're part of any other crop, you realize what this money goes back towards as far as what we just saw, other programs, more or less in education, and this will help, you know, give us more details and info to help grow this crop further down the line. So that's pretty much it. Any questions about it? Okay. All right. Thank y'all.
Okay, everyone, if we can take a seat, and we'll have Dr. Shaheed come up in just a second. A quick question for everyone. Has everyone in here heard the pointers about the Citrus Commodity Commission? Because if you have already, then we don't need to talk about it again at the end to have a repeat information. Has everyone heard that? Okay. All righty. And everyone knows that the annual Citrus Association Conference will be February 27th. Okay, so Dr. Shaheed, if you would come on up and do your presentation for us. Thank you for being here with us. And when he is finished, after his questions, we'll be done for the day. Okay? Be sure to do the survey. Josh said, please do the survey at the back, the orange piece of paper back there. And I think there's still some fruit left in the box for everybody to take home. Those are Sugar Bells and Tangelos. Okay? Thank you, Dr. Shee.
Thank you, Lindy. My name is Mohammed Shahid, and I'm working as a fruit physiologist at North Florida Research and Education Center, University of Florida. So the main focus with the cold hardy citrus, to how to improve the cold hardiness in citrus. And that's the major part. Otherwise, the other crops working with persimmon, blackberry, blueberry, that are also under my research portfolio. So here today I'm going to talk about silicon. And I'm working with this element more than 10 years. And it's very we have got a very good results. And in my program, I think I'm the first person who has started work on silicon on citrus. So most of the time when I deliver a talk, I remember last year, I think I gave 12 talks on silicon in the New York, Massachusetts, and Clemson. So and I will show you the different results of the different impacts of silicon in different crops. And at the end, some results so far we are working with silicon. And some of the growers, when I showed at the end of the talk, you will feel that silicon is the solution of everything, because I will show you the effects on post-harvest, on nutrient uptake, like that. So the problem is that, yes, silicon is working. So the reason is that why it's not well adopted by the growers. The first thing is that the right product. And other thing is that a lot of research, you will Google silicon, you will have thousands of articles on silicon. But it's just greenhouse research. I'm the researcher, I will do some short study, publish the paper, and that's done. No one is testing it under the field condition, which is a really growers needed. A few pots, 10 pots study is not the same thing gonna happen in the field. So I'm taking it to the field, starting with the citrus and the blackberry, and that's I'm gonna share with you here. So in this talk, I will talk about the introduction. And one thing, my talk is going to be, I shaped my talk for 30 minutes, but Jake Price, who is unfortunately not here, and he called me, Mohammed, can you take my 30 minutes? I said, okay. And I have to extended it up to the beyond the 30 minutes. So the silicon is basically, it's a, after oxygen, it's the most abundant element in the earth crust, about 25%. And the first one is the oxygen with about 49%. And we are talking about the silicon that is basically water-soluble silicon. The silicon we are applying to the plants that the water-soluble, and the form is the orthosalicylic acid and not the Si2. Basically, the plants can uptake this form of silicon, and then it is accumulated within the tissues as a Si2, as a silica. So sometimes growers also ask me a question, is it the same silicon, the adhesive that we use? No, don't apply this one. We don't want to seal the stomata and our so difference is just E. So silicon and the silicon. So sorry, maybe you will have difficulty in my accent, but make sure the E, we don't want to use this compound. So, and silicon is basically like its concentration ranges between 0.1 to 10% dry weight basis, and it's more in the grain crops, and then grasses and legume, fruit, vegetables and fruits. And most of its accumulation is in the, it's vary from organ to organ, but in the mature leaves. So, and another thing, is it the silicon is the beneficial or essential? So basically, first I will give you what's the difference. So basically, if you will say the essential are those elements like your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, which is 100% needed by the plants to complete their life cycle. So if you will miss any of those, they will not complete their life cycle, their production, their growth will be affected. So the silicon is not an essential element. It is a beneficial. If you will add to the plants, it will give you the more supplemental, it will give you the better effects. You can see that it is a vitamin for the plants. So it is not the essential, but it is the beneficial. So in 2012, before 2012, it was not approved, but in 2012, it was approved as a plant beneficial element by the Association of American Plant Food Control Officials. And after this approval, a lot of the silicon product in different forms are launched in the market. So big problem that the growers call me, Mohammed, we using this product, it's not working. And to be honest, and sorry if someone from silicon manufacturer is sitting here, the problem is that they sell, on the label, they say that it is 20% bioavailable silicon. But in reality, we have done some testing from the lab, random, it's not available. Even though some products says 15%, and it's not providing about 2%. And they sell the name with the silicon, but they will add nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Growers see some impact, but basically it's other nutrient, not the silicon. So right product is very important. So, and why you should add? Because it is a very multi-dimensional. It will improve your yield, your plant growth, increase the resistance to different biotic abiotic stresses, improve the resilience to different biotic abiotic factors. So it, and also important in like a plant defense against different pathogens. In the next coming slides, just want to show you some pictures of some interesting results done by colleagues or some other researchers on different crops. So basically, if you talk about its impact, so it improves the shelf life of your produce. Like it reduces the internal decomposition, like it's important required in the stone and palm fruits, increases the fruit firmness, and we have got very good results in blackberry and citrus. and reduces the cracking, increase the skin hardiness, and reduces the deterioration in cold storage. And currently we are working on a project using silicon to improve the shelf life in BlackBerry. It's really working very well in different cold storage conditions. So this is the one study in which the plants from the silicon-treated trees and non-treated, they were put in the cold storage for 1 month at 4 degrees centigrade. And you can see after 1 month, the control, there is a great reduction in the weight loss, the skin is ruptured, a lot of leakage as compared to the non-treated one. So, and the same in the grapes. The silicon control, you know, in grapes, the riches, the stalks which hold the berries, it is a big factor because once you harvest it, the berries become separated. So in silicon treated, you can see that they are still green, and they keep the bunch all together and connected with the stalks, as compared to in non-treated, they are dried out under storage conditions. This is one of the just picture from one of my research project when I was at Cornell University doing a postdoc. So in New England region, the ornamental industry is a big industry, and although most of the plants are more better, they can survive under cold environment, but the issue is that they are very sensitive to the heat. Even though a few hours heat, it is damaging to them. So the petunia is one of the most popular selling brand. Most of the greenhouse industry, they are producing it and sending it throughout the United States. So you can see that this is the 95 Fahrenheit, the non-control, and 0.4. After putting them at this temperature, the plants are almost dead, but it helped to improve. At 1/4, still the plants are better, but at 95 Fahrenheit, the symptoms are there and severe, but once we put them back to the normal conditions, the plants were recovered very well. But without silicon, they could not make it back. So that's the one of the significant effect of silicon in heat stress. And we are also evaluating in North Florida in citrus, because our growers are using kaolin clay, because in June, July, August, we have a lot of heat, and we have the sunburn injury in fruits and in the leaves. So we are evaluating the silicon effects in citrus. So this is one of research. So before coming to this position, 2 years ago, I was working as an associate professor at University of New Hampshire, working with the control environment agriculture. And all the New England region, they are a big fan of silicon usage, and they are using it in their in leafy green production, in ornamental production, to address the diseases, especially powdery and downy mildew. And this project was funded by by the industry. They want me to evaluate the silicon in lettuce production. So you can see in this picture, so basically this one, we use 3 varieties, 3 different types of lettuce, and the control, and then we use 25 parts per million foliar application, root application, and combination of both. And you can see that silicon versus the control, the head size is about 18 to 25% is increased. And there is not only you can see the clear differences control versus silicon treated. But in lettuce, overall, we observed that when you analyze the data, the 25 parts per million, the foliar root application, it gave us the better results. And also, when we put these heads under storage condition, it also improved the shelf life. Another issue, that was not the part of our project, but we observed that in lettuce production, the tip burn, it is the main issue which reduces the marketable yield. You can see the dry tips. So it could be, there are 2 main issues. Once the head becomes dense, the low aeration results reduce the uptake of calcium, and it caused this tip burning. But in silicon treated plants, we did not see any symptoms of the tip burning or leaf necrosis throughout the experiment. So that was a very good effect of silicon. And this is also the part of this project, and they're funded by the greenhouse industry and ornamental industry and New England. And the proven winner, if it's a major, they are ornamental producer. So because they ship the plants from New Hampshire to all the way to the Oregon and Seattle area, they had some where they go to the Publix or Home Depot and stay for a longer period of time, and where they are not getting much water. So they want to improve the drought tolerance by using the silicon. They did some preliminary data, then they contact us and gave us some money to do this trial. And we did this study in their leading brands. So you can see that this is the control, then 25 parts per million foliar and root application, 50 foliar and root, and then combination of both foliar and. When I use the word foliar plus drenching, it means first week we applied 25 parts per million foliar, and then next week we use the root application. So you can see the clear differences. Control is almost dead, did not make it back when we put them with the watering condition. This one could not make it back. These plants were 50% back when we bring them to normal condition, re-watered them, and all these three are back, are 100% back without any damage, significant damage. And the best one was that, the best one was this one, 25 low percentage, 25 parts per million per application foliar and root application. So, and the same in the Infinity White, like Genia Impatiens, you can see the differences. And with this one is the still 25 parts per million, both foliar and root application was the best one. And when we remove the plants from the roots, at the end of experiment, you can see how silicon improved the root formation. These are the controls, and these are the with silicon. And you can see there's a maximum root formation in silicon, 25 parts per million foliar first root application. So, and we have also done some hydroponic study in blackberry and in citrus. It really working. It also increased the root formation. And we are now this year we are starting experiment to see its impact in nursery production. So we also observed that because we also had the industry which used the cut flowers, and the issue in cut flowers is that because they need the long stalks because they use it to make the bouquet, but there is a lot of lodging issues. And in silicon, we were improved the diameter of the stem, and you can see the stalks are straight. The reason why it helped in, and this is the reason when silicon was discovered in rice, it reduced the lodging. And for initially it started to reduce, use against, like in Japan, to reduce the lodging in silica, in rice and in wheat. So this is the main reason when you apply the silicon, this is the silicon deposition in xylem cell walls leads to the reduced lodging. And this is a real cell wall, and the microscopic imaging, when you apply the silicon, all the red things, it is the silicon, which is accumulated around the cell walls. So when you apply the silicon to the plants, its accumulation is around the cell walls. When it accumulated around the cell wall, it makes the turgidity and make them straight, and that's the reason it reduces the lodging. So just a very quick view about the disease management in using the silicon. So what happened basically there are two modes of action. The first mode of action is the mechanical action. It is that this is a schematic view without silicon. When you apply the silicon, it makes a layer on the leaf surface. And in this way, it prevents the entry of the pathogens inside the leaf. And other thing, once it gets absorbed, it increases the formation of different secondary metabolites like jasmonic acid and phenols, which induce the resistance against different pathogens. So this is another component of silicon in increasing the diseases. I'm not a pathologist, so just giving you some basic information. And this is the citrus leaf applied with silicon and without silicon. All these white things you see that this is a silicon accumulation in the leaf. And this is the layer I'm talking about, this is the layer that it makes when you apply the silicon to the plants. And this is without silicon. So these are different examples of diseases, and that has been silicon is very effective against these pathogens in different fruits. In avocado, strawberry, citrus, cherry, there's a lot of other examples. Silicon for disease control, if you are using the for disease control, there are some considerations. So it's very important to build up the, silicon is not like a chemical, like not a growth regulator. You will apply today and after a week you will see the effect. No, you will not be able like that. If you want to see the impact of silicon, it should be continuous supply in your nutrition program, and you have to build up a level threshold limit within the within your leaf and tissues, and then you will see the impact of the silicon. So, and right now in my program, we are working to, especially with citrus and blackberry, we are trying to identify what is the best threshold level. Right now we don't know, like nitrogen and phosphorus or potassium, okay, this level of silicon should be in your leaves and you should apply it. So we are wilting, we are trying to identify it in citrus and in blackberry, like what is the threshold limit we need to build in our leaves so that we can get the maximum benefits from silicon. So, and disease suppression is basically depend upon the amount of the silicon. More is the amount of silicon in your tissues, there would be the more disease resistance, and it is found to be effective as a fungicide. And silicon sources, mode of application, it is very critical in getting the benefits, but still more research is needed in this part. In pest management, basically the silicon reduce the oviposition. There is some research, the insects which fed on the silicon treated plants, their egg laying capacity is reduced, and it also affect on their damage their mouth parts, which results also a kind of strategy to reduce insect pest control, reduce their appetite, and it also increase the amount of the herbivore-induced plant volatiles. These are the compound when plants under any kind of stress or any disease or pathogen attack, it produces some specific type of the volatiles which attract the natural enemies. And it is a communication signal between the plant and the environment and the natural enemy that are attacking the plant. So this is you see this is the electron microscopy, and these are the white dots of the leaf. These are the accumulated in the leaf epidermis. Yeah, this is very interesting research. It's on grasshopper. So the grasshopper was allowed to feed on a silicon-treated plants. And this is the without silicon. These you can see these are the mouth parts, no damage. This is a low level of silicon. There are some symptoms of damage, and this is a high level of silicon. Medium high level, you can see their mouth parts are broken, and at higher level, you can see how they're damaging. So this is the one kind of strategy when the chewing, especially chewing insect pests, when they attack the silicon-treated plants, so they have a big damage to their eating mouth parts, and which is resulted in their reduce their attack on the plant. And psyllid, as you know, it's a big threat to our citrus industry, especially in Florida. And this research has been done in Colombia, where they found that the silicon is helpful in reducing the like a psyllid population. So they use the foliar soil and foliar. So you can see this is the control, no silicon, and there's a maximum number of eggs. Psyllid eggs in the leaves, but with the use of silicon, it is reduced. And the most effective one is the foliar soil plus foliar application. And the same is the results in nymphs. So they counter it is reduced with the silicon application, especially when the duration with the treatment 3 days after treatment application. And the same was the results with the adults. The number of adults, you can see at the initial days, it was not a big difference, but at the day 3rd, it's a control, and these are the silicon treated. And the good results is with the foliar, soil plus foliar application. And in another research, silicon was helpful in reducing the aphid population about 80% in fava bean, and leaf miner about 60%, and leaf worm in about like 55%. So when I give the talk last year, I remember to the New York greenhouse industry, they invited me and they asked me, Muhammad, you should add one slide. It is also helpful to the human, to our growers. So then I added this slide. So we are talking about silicon. It's not only about like just the plants. It is really very useful for us, for the humans. And yeah, so there's a lot of these kind of products are available. So silicon, we also need to more stronger bond of our growers, and we also make them to more stronger. So it's not only about the plants, and there is some studies is ongoing at Cornell University. They are trying biofortification, if you are familiar with the concept, to enrich the specific nutrients within the crop. And zinc, silicon, and selenium, these are the top 3 they are working with. So they are using different approaches, molecular approach and foliar application, so that we can enrich these compounds within our edible parts. It's a root or fruit or the leaves. Silicon application methods, there are different sources of silicon fertilizer. The wollastonite, it is a naturally occurring, the calcium silicate. That's different companies pack them and they sell it as a source of silicon. The tuff, that's a volcanic rock, another source. The byproducts from different industrial procedures of smelting of wollastonite and iron and magnesium, they are also marketed as a silicon fertilizer. The silicates of potassium and sodium and biochar, if you are familiar, the plant material from different plant material, they are burned at high temperature in the absence of oxygen. The final charcoal product is known as biochar. It is right now it is a very emerging in fruits and in the row crops. So from different feedstocks, the biochar made up of rice husk, bamboo sticks, and miscanthus. It is enriched with naturally it is enriched with silicon. And silica nanoparticles, it's a newly advanced form of silicon fertilizer because these are very small particles, less than 100 nanometer, very reactive and easily uptake by the plants. And diatomaceous earth, it is also a form of silicon fertilizer. So there are different factors affecting on the uptake, like the soil, plant type, silicon form, and application method. And especially the Florida growers ask me, Muhammad, we are most of the sandy, and why not? There is already silica, and why we need to add? Because yes, we have a lot of silica in our sandy soils, but it is not bioavailable. It is not plant uptake. We need the monosalicylic acid. That's a water-soluble form. It's silicon application methods. It can be applied as a soil application, incorporated into the soil if you're using the solid form or powder form. In soilless mixes, now if you are familiar with the greenhouse industry or the ornamental, a lot of potting mix, they are already incorporating silicon and they are selling it silicon incorporated the potting mix. And it can be used as a fertigation or foliar application. Seed priming, you can treat the seed with the silicon, soak them with the water, or you can dust them. Cutting, same way, misting or dipping the cutting with the silicon solution or fertigation. So these are the different ways or methods you can use to treat your seeds or your cuttings or your plants with silicon. Silicon application rate, so definitely the crop-wise research is needed. It's important to have run small tests, but based on, because I have worked on silicon on a lot of crops, and I have started from 0 parts per million to 1,500 parts per million in peach and in grapes, and I haven't seen any phytotoxic effects. And to my knowledge, I haven't seen any any report indicating that there is any phytotoxic effects of silicon in plants. There would be, I would not say not, but I think it's on the safe side. So based on my experience and based on the research what I have done, so this is the safe levels, like if you want to use a foliar application, 50 to 100 parts per million is the best. For fertigation, 50 parts per million. For misting, 20 to 25 parts per million. And soil amendments, 1 to 6 ton per acre, depends upon your soil pH. Because if you are adding the solid material, powder material, it may raise the pH of your soil. And for soilless substrates, if you want to get benefits, so at least minimum 25 to 35 parts per million should be incorporated in your potting mix. These are just an example. As I said, hundreds of products are available in the market, but they are just selling silicon. What they label, it's not they sell silicon, but indirectly they are selling the nitrogen, potassium, or phosphorus. So it's important to get the right product. So there are some products which are also registered for use in organic production, like these are the products which are OMRI registered, and you can use it in organic production. And the important points, as I said, the potassium silicate, basically it may raise the pH, so we don't recommend it to use with your nutrition program. If you want to use silicon, apply it separately because it may precipitate. But no, there are some good companies who are selling a very nice product of silicon, very good amount of plant available silicon, and that's the only silicon, not other nutrients. So, and when you're gonna apply, always make the fresh solution. Don't use the old solution of silicon. And one thing, if you are using potassium silicate or sodium silicate or calcium silicate, you should know that you are also adding potassium or calcium. So accordingly, you should adjust that concentration. You should know that how much in your product is potassium or silicon, so that you can, in your other program, you can reduce that amount. And so now I'm going to show you some results. So we have started this project. The main target is to improve the cold and heat tolerance in citrus. And so as you are familiar, as a citrus growers, we had a bad, severe event in the last 2022, December 22nd to 25th or 6th. These are our 5 consecutive days below freezing that we have recorded in Quincy. And one of my graduate students who was working on improving the genomic stuff, on improving the cold hardiness in citrus, and he evaluated the last 50 years data, and this event came after 40 years. And last time it was 1891 and then 1899, and it washed out the industry, and it was the same sphere. But the good thing, I think the same situation here, the groves in North Florida, they are really back to the production. So although we lose about 80 to 90% yield, but our trees are back, they are very well. So you can see that this is before freeze, this is with freeze. What happened? All the fruits and leaves, they're dropped, and now the trees are coming back, and we are hoping that still freeze is coming, knocking on our door, but hopefully I believe it would not be terrible like as happened in 2022. So due to this reason, and based on our previous results, like it could be good to analyze the silicon for gold improvement. So we are having, these are our collaborators we are working with. We have 4 sites on-farm trials. We are using 3 levels. Distilled water as a control, 50 parts per million and 100 parts per million. We are using bi-weekly and monthly application. And now we are in the 2nd year of this trial. And this is also first going to this study, we came up with these levels on our freezing study. We have a controlled programmed freezing chamber where we can create the situation, all the freezing condition according to the real environment. If we have to just program it according to how much per hour we need to reduce the temperature, and then we spray the plants, and then we put them in the freezing chamber. This is our freezing chamber where we put the plants at different 0 to -6, -8 temperature. And you can see after 48 hours of freezing stress, this is the silicon, non-silicon treated. The plants, you can see what's happening with the leaf are almost, they are wilted, they are dropping down, and the plants are still in a better condition with silicon treatments. And here, this is the control. This is the silicon treated, and this is the non-silicon, no silicon. You can see this is the dark patches. Basically, this is the soaking, and this is the indication of that the cells are damaged. These conditions occur when temperature falls below freezing. The water inside the tissues, it becomes crystals of freeze, and it push the cell walls and break the cell walls. And so these leaves is next. In the next step, these leaves are going to drop, and they are not going back. So you can see we did not see any symptoms with the silicon treated. There is no damage to the cell walls, internal cells, and you can see the clear symptoms. So this is basically what happened when under normal condition, when temperature falls below the freezing, you can see the internal water in the tissues, it freezes and become the crystals of the ice. So when crystals of ice becomes, we call it nucleation, it pushes the tissues inward, outward, and it results in this condition, this one. So this is the first symptoms of freezing. And this is the electron microscopy of the leaf. You can see that this is the how freezing affects under control condition and under freezing. You can see all the very well shaped and uniform cell walls. Once temperature goes, the nucleation resulted in a damaging impact to the cell walls, and you can see how the cells are damaged inside the leaf, and this is the reason you will see the soaking patches in the leaves, and this is the cell death basically. And this is the different, some of our growers and extension agents and my graduate student. We are working in this area. We have this Tallahassee, so this is Georgia, so we have trials in this region, just on the borderline. And this is we are in the field trial, so we are applying the silicon to our trees. We have 2 sites for red navels and 2 sites at Satsuma avari. And when last year, we did not know that by that time, so that December freeze is coming. We started this trial in October, and by then, when freeze came, I think we applied just 3 applications. And you can see that actually the grower, on 22nd, the freeze started, and grower called me on 29th and 30th. He said, Mohammed, do you know what happened with the silicon trial? I said, yes, it's very damaging and all is gone. He said, no, the silicon is treating very well. The plants are still leaves. And you can see that this is with freeze, and this is with with silicon, and still the leaves are there. And these plants really, they gave us the fruit this year, and they are still doing. You can see when you go to the grove, you can see that this patch is really different, lush green and better in growth. And we did not remove much of the dead wood from these silicon treated plants as compared to the. You can see the almost there. They are also back, but still they are not like these trees. These are much better condition. And this picture is taken just in the last freeze that in early January. So we have a new 950 trial, and we had a temperature around about 30 just for a few hours. And we are silicon treated plants. We did not see the much symptoms, and you can see this is without silicon. And this picture is taken just 2 weeks before under natural conditions. So especially the new growth is all fried out. And in our mature trees, after the December freeze event 2022, we are evaluating about 20 varieties, and we did not see the fruiting in most of the varieties, and we removed, starting depending upon the cultivar type, we removed about 10% to 70% dead wood from the trees. Okay, so in some varieties where we applied the silicon, one thing that we did not remove much of the wood. There was a less damage to the. When I'm talking about damage, we did some electron microscopy. I'm talking about the internal cell damage. There was not a much damage to the internal cell walls, and plants are recovered well. But they also give the fruits versus non-silicon. So that's the question we are following, we are investigating what's the reason, what happened with the biochemistry. It's not a much yield, it's just 10 to 20% as compared to under normal condition, but it was good for us, trees with silicon treatment, they gave us the fruit. At least it's good for us and our staff and faculty, they're enjoying these fruits. So, but more intensive research is needed. So, silicon treatment to the freeze event. So basically, what is the mechanism? So far, we are working with what's the reason why it is helping the trees. So that there are different factors are involved. So the one that we realized that's the osmolytes. So basically, the osmolytes glycine, betaine, and proline. There's some specific production of compounds, and including the sugars, which work as the antifreeze. So what I'm working in my research program, we have to prevent the internal water. It looks very simple mechanism. If we were able to develop or to identify any growth regulator or any compound that we know that, okay, freeze is coming after a week or after 2 days or 3 days, we can apply it to the plants, and that will act as an antifreeze. The same thing, if you are living in the northeast side, you will add the antifreeze in your radiator, and it will not freeze. So that's the thing, if we are looking for and we are doing the genomic analysis, what are the growth regulators? Because Satsuma is the most cold tolerant, we consider that. So we are going to compare what's the differences Satsuma versus the grapefruit, which is a sensitive, and what are the compounds we can identify and we can apply to the plants, we can improve if we would be able to increase the, reduce the internals nucleation, then there would be no damage. This is the main factor, and that's the thing we have to identify. And another factor, because I got a chance, and it was very surprising to me, why this year, even though Satsuma was also the damaging, and it was more damaged as to some other cultivars. And Satsuma's found to be most cold tolerant. It can easily tolerate to 8 Fahrenheit. I got a chance to talk with some of the Satsuma growers in Japan from where actually it came. And still they are growing Satsuma, and they have a temperature about 8, 7 Fahrenheit. The reason is that the winter came very slowly, and it is very constant. Plants can get enough time to get acclimated and to activate their mechanism. What's happening in North Florida, and I think in the South Georgia, in 1 hour temperature is coming like this and then going there. Plant starts acclimated, and the next time it becomes deacclimated. And that's the reason. So this is the problem we have to get solved to create to reduce the freezing and to get the well-stable acclimation process within the trees. So this is the basically 2 compounds, the proline and glycine betaine. These work as an antifreeze within the plants. If they are in a good amount, your water in the cell walls and intercellular spaces, it will not make ice crystals, and your plants will be fine. And when we analyze silicon versus non-silicon, we found that you can see non-silicon and with silicon. So there is a significant increase in the osmolytes concentration. And that's one of the things that is making the silicon is working to improve the cold hardiness. So the only thing we are working to refine to first thing threshold level. What threshold level we need to accumulate to establish in our leaves or in the plant tissues, and what method of application. So this is I'm not an entomologist, but we observed that when I went to the groves and my people, and they said, Mohammed, we have seen that when we go to the grove, there is a less leaf miner attack in the citrus, in all of our 4 sites. Then I contact with Lauren, who's our entomologist, and gave me the protocol, and she sent us, and we did, based on her protocol, we collected the data. This is silicon treated. You did not see much of the symptoms of the leaf miner, but with non-silicon one, there is a lot of silicon. So when I talk about a control, it means we did not apply any pesticide for leaf miner control. So, and based on data, we observed that at different timings, we are collecting the data, and you can see the difference, non-silicon, how much is the leaf miner attack. There's a clear differences between the different, because we are collecting the data on weekly basis, and I just show you some of the initial data. So the silicon is also working, and it could be, maybe Lauren is gonna communicate with us and collaborate with us what's the effect is formation of secondary metabolites, or it's also affecting their mouth parts. So she is very interested, and we're gonna investigate more on this side. So we are also working on the fruit quality. So once the trees I showed you, so I got and got an opportunity. Let's see what's happened in the fruit quality. We harvested trees and we analyzed them for different fruit quality parameters: fruit firmness, shelf life, fruit drop. Yes, so one thing we also observed, there is a very good effect on the fruit drop is reduced. We're using in silicon treated trees. And it is just our visual observation. From this year, we will collect the scientific data. So, but on our visual observation under the hurricane condition and windy condition, we observed that fruit drop is reduced. So respiration and fruit weight loss, we did not see any impact of silicon on color, but these are the parameters. There is a clear differences. So, why? So I'm sorry, I don't know why it's not show up here. So basically, it is the fruit weight loss. When we put them, we harvest the fruits, we put them in the cold storage at 4 degrees centigrade, and we collected the fruit weight loss after 7 days, 14 days, and 21 days. So basically at the 7 days, if we did not see any big differences. But at 21 days, if you will see that this one basically is the fruit weight loss. It's max. What was the bar graph? But anyway, I don't know what were the bars, but overall the message is that silicon helped like in reducing the weight loss, and it also improved the fruit firmness. So we have one of the packing house facility in North Florida, and he came to me. He said, I started using 3 to 4 years ago. Some company came to me, and I said, what is the impact? He said, what I have seen that fruit firmness is improved. So this is the thing he observed. And we also observed in this study, like when we harvested the fruits, put them in the cold storage, and at different time intervals from 0, 7, 14, and 21, we've seen that there is although there is a reduction in the fruit firmness, but with the silicon treated, it's constant, not a much reduction in the fruit firmness. And that's a good indication. It means it's good to improving your shelf life. So the take-home message for silicon, and as I said, it's not a solution of everything. From my presentation, it says like that, but field testation is most important. So it's so effective in improving the plant growth and shelf life, and including citrus. And the plants can uptake silicon in the form of monosalicylic acid. This is most important. And the water-soluble silicon, if you will see the label, it will show you it has 24%. This is not important. It is useless if it is not plant available. The most important, water soluble. How much is the water soluble silicon? You have to ask your vendor how much water soluble silicon in the form of monosalicylic acid is available. Not a big phytotoxicity. We haven't seen phytotoxic effects. Application rate is dependent upon the crop. And as I said, and based on my research and working with the industry who are using silicon, the constant application, like if you will apply 200 parts per million, one time in a month, maybe it would not be effective, versus you will apply 10 parts per million, but continuously in your drip irrigation or your feeding program. The silicon is like that, low dose, but constant supply, you will be getting the most good effects as compared to high dose. And overall, so far, although it's different in some crops, we have seen the foliar is better versus roots, but overall, the crops are well responsive to the root application to the silicon. And it also mitigates some other abiotic stresses like salinity, heat, drought, cold. But still, we are working on physiology and its mechanism. What are the main thing to determine the threshold? What threshold per crop, starting with the citrus and blackberry, and then move to the other crops, we needed to establish so that you can have your tissue analysis and you should know that, okay, well, have you achieved this level or not. So on the other part, we are working on molecular physiology and what are the real bases are associated, especially for the cold tolerance, and what genes are associated with which the silicon triggered and responsible for cold hardiness. So thank you very much. Any question?
See like different forms of silicate, and you saying potassium silicate, is that what y'all are using?
So potassium silicate, what's the question?
Potassium silicate, but then what's the best form you see all?
Yeah, so potassium, so if you want, yes, the question is that there are different forms of the silicon, like potassium silicate, sodium silicate, calcium silicate. So I would go the potassium silicate is the good form. So you will be the product where we have used using the silicon source as a potassium base, their uptaking capacity is good, that we have seen that. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that you might touch on the lack of uptake by growers in using silicon. Can you maybe mention or talk about that quick? Why you don't see much adoption?
Yeah, so the much of the adoption is that silicon is a lot of, you will go to the literature, it looks like it's a solution of everything. Yes, but it's just lab-oriented research. If I'm the researcher, I will do some work, I will have some data in few pots, and I will just publish the paper and that's it. But it's not like that. Silicon behave differently in the greenhouse, in your experimental or graduate student stuff versus in the field. So this is the thing we have to do, I will say the research-driven extension. This is the most important thing. And so that's I have started. I'm not like just working in the greenhouse and presenting to the growers, okay, this is working. It's more better to have the on-farm trials. Like the blueberry growers contact me, I start working with them. I am working already with 4 citrus growers. We're gonna start 80 acres of citrus trials in South Florida to see its impact in the HLB, because we have seen that it promotes a root formation, and we think that it could be helpful. And so that's the lack of thing. Like we need the like a field tested validation instead of having just laboratory. Yes.
Yeah, Joe Franklin here. We grow citrus about 40 miles west of here, and mainly satsumas. I took plant analysis samples Monday, got them back yesterday, and I did for the silicon. I wanted to know how much they had in there. I did 2 test plots. One of them's got 1%, the other one's got 2.7%. Now, what is my goal? How much silicon do I need in that plant to protect me from cold weather?
Yeah, so the question is that they have done their soil analysis, and one of their plot has 1%, another one is 2.some%, 2.7%. So the question is that how much threshold level they should develop in their soil so that they can have maximum in their tissues, so that they have maximum protection. So as I said, so that's I don't have any answer for that, and that's one of my work we are doing. So hopefully within next year or within a year you will have, especially in citrus, we will have the recommendation for that.
All right, well, I can't wait till next year. I'm gonna do it now. So
Yeah.
what's
So.
your educated guess of how much percent-wise?
So based on our analysis on the study that I have shown, and because the plants which survive well in the cold tolerance, silicon versus non-silicon, we have seen that like a 3% 3%. If you have a 3% accumulation in the leaves, they're performing well. But this is I will not say the 100% exact, but I'm based on our research. So the plants who perform well when we did their analysis versus the non-treated one, we have seen that 3% is the best level.
Okay, just for your information, the ones that got back 2.7%, the leaves are on the tree, they're green, they're not falling off. The ones with 1%, they turned yellow, and they're shooting right now.
Then that's the answer that it means that we have to get a little bit more. It means the silicon is working. Yeah. Yes.
You had mentioned something about incompatibilities with other fertilizers or certain pHs.
Yeah, so if that's only with if there are some companies who just want to sell. They know that okay, the growers are interested in and they want to sell. They're just taking like a smelting of oats. They are just taking the raw product, pack it, and sell it. That could be a problem. It will precipitate the nutrients. But if they are good water-soluble silicon, if the pH, because the problem is that if you are having a 2 gallon or 1 gallon of a stock, it has a high pH and it may precipitate the others. So just safe side, it's better to apply it separately. Like my concern is don't mix them with your nutrition. You can apply it alternatively. Yes.
You feel like the best way to apply the silicone is in a soil drink?
Yes, this is the root application. So far for citrus, we would recommend to apply the root application. It's not only impacting the root formation but it also, we haven't done research, but some reports indicated that silicon is also beneficial for plant growth promoting microbes. It increases their activities and it's good for them.
Fertigation, okay?
Yeah, fertigation is okay. Yes, drip irrigation. If you want to use the fertigation, you can go to the continuous supply and low dose, it would be more beneficial.
When you were doing foliar and drench, was that at the same time or you alternate?
Alternate. What we have done when we use the word foliar versus drenching, so the first one time it's a foliar and next time it's a drenching. Yeah. So what's the reason why? Because I have shown you the latest research. I worked on 30 varieties because these were from one of our breeders. And I have observed that in some varieties it did not work. Some varieties foliar give very good results, and in some varieties foliar versus root application give very good results. So it's all about basically there are some selective channels which it adopt from the root uptake, and basically there are two groups of the plants. Silicon accumulators and silicon non-accumulators. So if silicon non-accumulator you are dealing, and the citrus is silicon non-accumulator, it means it can uptake just to some extent. Okay, if you are using the it doesn't, if you are applying 25 parts per million or 100, it have to uptake just a selective amount. So instead, in that kind of like a non-accumulator, the good strategy, you have to apply for the both way, so from the root, from the foliar versus root, and with low dose but more frequency. But for accumulator, like a rice or grasses, they are a very good uptaker. They can eat very well. You can apply from the root application. So that due to this reason, we apply that for the both, yes. So that we can,
Citrus is
non-accumulator, yeah. So for citrus, it's better to, two ways is better, yeah. So, and if you will ask me, in these two ways, which is better for citrus, I will go for root application, yeah.
Is there any economic analysis?
That's a good question, yeah. So we have done some economical analysis, not a real time, but based what we have seen. So if you will apply one time, two-time application, sorry, for citrus, it will cost you $12. 12. 1, 2, yes. Per acre, yeah. Yeah, it's. So yeah, so basically we use just we got it from the. This is a company we just got the pure. It's not a product. They send us the water soluble silicon with the 12% availability. We got it from a company not with any brand name. So because it was for research, and they gave us the material with any tag. So that was just monosalicylic acid that we got it. Yeah. But this year I have started with the two companies because I had a meeting with them, with their chemists, and based on the chemistry and what I have observed, they are a really good product, and hopefully I have starting trial this year, and these would be the good, like they are really focused on the silicon and not other nutrients, and they have.
Can you share the names of those products with us? The two that you said you're going to be working with.
Yeah, so the problem is that they are in the patent phase right now. So I'm working with them. They are not patent yet. So based on my information, then they will be. So they will launch it. So these are because they are some California-based companies, fertilizer company. So once they.
Is there any product out in the market which are kind of real, or can you make any distinctions in these products?
Yeah, so there is a Dynagrow. We work with them. Their product is working good. Yeah, so there are some egg cell. I think they're also working well. So as compared to rest of the others. So I'm not promoting them, but based on my comparison, I think they have their product is delivering good silicon. So because when we did some random analysis, most of the companies who says 15% available, so they just hide something. They say 20% silicon. Okay, there would be, but what is the plant bioavailable silicon, which is the monosalicylic acid? We are not talking about just silicon elemental. Elemental silicon or silica, it's useless. It's not, even though it would be 90%. We are the maze. If you are going to choose a product, talk to the company. Okay, let us know how much percentage of water-soluble monosalicylic acid is there. We want this one. We don't need just number silicon 90% or 20%. So water-soluble silicon, we need it. That's plants only can uptake.
We also need to kind of put that message a little differently rather than talking about silicon.
Yeah.
Like a water-soluble silicon.
Yeah, you are right. Yes, water-soluble silicon. I agree. The company I'm talking about, that was the first point, and once I think they launch the product, they are mentioning this name actually, and they are very clearly they are going to deliver this message, pure, simply silicon. So they have using the word simply silicon, and they have the water-soluble silicon. Okay, thank you very much. So any question if you can email me, and yeah, thank you very much.